All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to another video here on Ben's Election Forecasting. As always, if you like the content, likes, comments, subscriptions, it really do help, and they are greatly appreciated. So we're going to be starting a little bit of a series today, a mini series, I guess. We're going to talk about the swing states in the 2020 election. And we're going to be talking about them in alphabetical order. So we're starting with Arizona. And I guess maybe Battleground State would be a much more accurate way to describe it. But as you can see, we've got the result by county from 2016. And likely we're going to see the same county map in 2020. And there's a reason. So I'm going to pull this up here. Now, if you look at the swing, this looks like, oh my goodness, Trump really underperformed here. And Clinton gained massively in terms of the vote share, but she really didn't. She only gained about 0.1% over Obama's performance in Arizona. Trump failed Romney's performance in Arizona by 5.5%. And a healthy portion of that is likely due to libertarians and a small percentage from McMullen voters. But predominantly it was Johnson voters who were the new voters were the lost voters for the Republicans, for the most part. I'm talking about 2.7% off of 4, so that'd be 1.3% for the Libertarians in Arizona. I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of that is Republicans who didn't want to vote for Trump, and most of them are probably going to vote for Trump again in 2020. Are going to vote for Trump in 2020. And this is because, and the majority of those are going to be in Maricopa County, which is, of course, the most important county when it comes to elections in Arizona, because it has the most population, it has Phoenix, and this is where most of the Democratic trend is in Maricopa County, in Phoenix itself. And yes, Arizona is trending towards the Democrats, but I think a lot of people are over-factoring in how much Trump underperformed in some states. I think a lot of people are forgetting that there was a massive surge in third-party votes, especially in states like Utah and Colorado and New Mexico and Nevada, and really just all over the nation. But let's talk about how a Democrat could win Arizona. And it's as simple as winning Maricopa County, which is certainly doable. And this, by the way, would be a Democratic win under normal circumstances. However, I don't think it's likely that Maricopa County flips. And as long as Republicans continue to win Maricopa County, Arizona is going to be a red state. Just barely. And a lot of people are going to be saying, no, it's competitive. Look at the midterms, look at the midterms, look at the midterms. But always be careful when you use midterms to look at a general election. But if we were to say that the midterms mattered in Arizona, or we'll get to it, Texas, because a lot of people are counting it as a battleground these days, and I think it would be wrong to ignore it completely. But a lot of people are saying that's proof that Texas is going to flip. No, it won't. Texas is not going to flip in 2020. It's likely it won't flip in 2024. It might flip in 2028, but probably not. In 2032, it also probably won't, simply because that's going to be a Republican year. If we follow the idea of pendulum theory, which is basically two-term Republican, two-term Democrat, two-term Republican, two-term Democrat. and it just goes back and forth. It's going to take a lot to upset that balance. And maybe this COVID-19 nonsense will upset it enough, but if it lasts into November, turnout is going to be extremely depressed. And old people vote. They always vote. And old people tend to be much more Republican than the nation as a whole. In addition, conservatives will vote no matter what because, well, conservatives believe in voting. Now, I'm not saying that Democratic voters, liberals, people who don't want another Trump term, don't believe in voting. It's just they're more likely to not turn out. I believe they believe in voting. They are just less likely to turn out in general because we're talking about, non-white voters don't turn out as much as white voters. College kids just don't vote in general, but they vote at a much smaller rate when they do vote. And there are a few other groups that just aren't reliable groups for the Democrats. And that's a problem in a year where we may see extremely depressed turnout. And that's leading to a lot more uncertainty in states that I am leaning or tilting towards the Democrats than I normally would have. I am a little bit more confident about states that I'm leaning or tilting towards the Republicans. Because if turnout is depressed, and we use the logic that when turnout decreases, groups that vote for Republicans still turn out, we're going to see stronger Republican victories than expected. Now, that is assuming that is the case. Obviously, there's still a lot of time before November, but we're down to about 6 months now. Or 7 months, sorry. Counting is hard sometimes, especially when you're effectively counting in public. Thank you, YouTube. But focusing back on Arizona is a very moderate state, and they like a certain type of candidate. They want a candidate who is kind of like a John McCain, who is not just presentable, but is also moderate. And if you want to get an idea of the general picture of an election, look at the way people talked about it during that period, and look at the comedy specifically that came out of that election, right? And this pretty much sums up what a lot of people will say about Arizona Republicans within the Republican Party as a whole these days. Just to quote a certain, I guess they're a meme now, but back in the 2000s, they were somewhat relevant in terms of comedy and culture and all that, and that's, of course, Jib Jab. And their 2008 election video, basically said that, forget McCain's a jackass who's liberally prone. And I think that's the way a lot of Republicans outside of Arizona have viewed Arizona Republicans since the 90s, is that they're kind of liberal-ish, and that they're not exactly the same as, say, a Republican from Texas or Kansas or Wyoming or, a southern state. Shut up. And I think that's a little bit oversimplified, but I have noticed that a lot of Republicans from Arizona could be described as rhinos. Republicans in name only. Of course, Democrats from Arizona also tend to be very moderate for the most part. Look at Kyrsten Sinema. She's not exactly been vocally or voting-wise completely anti-Trump. I believe she voted... no, she voted for both counts of impeachment, but she's also voted in favor of a lot of things that Trump wants. Not everything, of course. She's a Democrat. She's going to have some major disagreements. But this is why I think that Martha McSally can win in Arizona. She's certainly the weakest, one of the weakest candidates that the Republicans could have in Arizona. But she's just strong enough, and that's not saying she's strong. She's a weak candidate. But she's not weak enough to where Trump can't drag her to a victory. Trump will win Arizona, and he'll win it by just enough to get Martha McSally over the finish line. Because Mark Kelly just isn't a good fit for Arizona. The only thing he really has going for him is name recognition and the fact he's a former astronaut. That's all he has going for him. He doesn't have gun policies that line up with Arizona voters. He doesn't have economic or social policies that line up with Arizona voters. However, he's running up against a candidate that is so weak that he has a legitimate shot of flipping the seat in the Senate. But Arizona is still amenable to a certain type of Republican, which, a moderate Republican who is willing to and able to work across the aisle, like a Flake, like a Jeff Flake, like a John McCain, and is able to, and like a Doug Ducey, who is able to actually communicate well with one of the largest voting blocs in the state, which is Hispanic voters, who are absolutely necessary, and the GOP needs to do better about outreaching to them, because the GOP can make a very convincing case that they are the GOP is really where Hispanics should be, because Hispanics are, generally speaking, Catholic, and Catholicism is the future of Christianity here in the United States as white voters become less and less Christian and less religious. Catholics are going to make up the vast majority of practicing Christians in the United States not too far in the future. They already make up 30% of the U.S. population. So it's likely that the GOP will need them if they want to stay as the, quote, Christian party. And of course, you've got the family values, which Hispanics should love. And a lot of Hispanics come from nations with at least in terms of American politics, far left governments like Cuba, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Colombia, and all of these nations. And a lot of them are indirectly, a few of them are directly fleeing those governments, but a lot of them are maybe not consciously fleeing from those governments. Oftentimes the governments are the ones who have created a situation so bad in these nations that it's best to just leave for these families. And if the GOP can properly communicate that and invest in Spanish language advertising, Spanish speakers as their candidates, and promote their Hispanic members of Congress, the Senate, and at the state and local levels, the GOP can definitely make inroads in that group and maybe even match or surpass what George Bush was able to do in 2004, where he won approximately 45% of the Hispanic vote. But that is going to be imperative for the GOP if they want to keep a hold of the Southwest, or at the very least Arizona, and maybe win Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico back. But, you know, that's getting on into future videos. Anyway, I want to thank all y'all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Take it easy. Have a nice day.